Please take a seat if you can. So, dear Excellencies, dear participants from the academia, the industry, the state, municipalities, ladies and gentlemen. In the context of changing our ways of life to avoid climate changes, in the midst of geopolitical turbulences and war in Ukraine that hit hard the security architecture in Europe and energy prices skyrocketed, we are racing to strengthen Europe's competitiveness, uniting our brightest innovators and industries to provide for a greener future. One of the cornerstones to climate neutrality is shifting to the renewables and decarbonizing different sectors in our economies. And as the President of the Commission has said, hydrogen is our strategic choice on this journey to provide its part in the energy mix. Repower EU aimed to advance energy security and shifting away from the dependence on Russian fossil fuels. Hydrogen's part in these measures has been increased continuously, 3.5 times in Repower EU to 20.6 million tons of hydrogen from 5.6 million tons set out in hydrogen strategy just a few years ago, building additional capacities of 80 gigawatts to produce only green hydrogen. Also, the TSOs of 28 European countries have outlined a vision of building capacity to transport hydrogen in Europe, outlining 5 corridors to deploy half that amount, connecting the solar resources of the southern and eastern Europe and wind resources from the North Baltic and Mediterranean seas to the regions lacking sufficient renewables capacities, stretching to 28,000 kilometers. I am Liis Kasemets from the Ministry of the Environment in Estonia, lead to the Estonian Hydrogen Roadmap, and I welcome you all to today's seminar as we discuss what can we do and what is our ambition, aiming climate neutrality and offering added value cross-border, building our strategic capacities as well as strategic hubs. Let's discuss the vision of the aviation sector that is brand new and presented to you today. Today, we will have short presentations from the Excellencies, our Minister, and the Ambassador of Netherlands to Estonia, also from the industry side, followed by a discussion later on. So, now I give the floor to Her Excellency, Madame Özlem Canel, the Ambassador of the Netherlands in Estonia.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Lee said, my name is Özlem Canel. I am since August 2020 the Netherlands ambassador to Estonia. The title of this seminar is Is Estonia a Testbed for Climate Neutral Aviation with a question mark? I would take away the question mark and say that Estonia is definitely a testbed. First and foremost, of course, welcome to His Excellency Minister Sut and everyone here physically present, but also those of you who are joining us online for this seminar. I want to start off with Estonia, giving Estonia a big compliment for the high share of renewables in your energy mix. You have done an excellent job. When you dive deeper into the figures, we can see that there's an enormous potential for even more renewables like offshore wind, hydrogen, and sustainable aviation fuels. There's definitely a demand, and Estonia can, in time, maybe even be an exporter of energy. But for this to happen, there need to be taken urgent and bold steps, both by the government, but also by the private sector. As Lise also indicated, the war in Ukraine has put everything in fast-forward mode. Our energy independence from fossil fuels has become even more an acute priority than it already was. And tremendous steps for Estonia to apply, a tremendous step would be for Estonia to apply to become a hydrogen valley. As a representative of the Netherlands, I'm very proud to say that, of course, we in the Netherlands have the first EU hydrogen valley in Groningen, and it is very aptly called Heaven with a double N. And we are very ready to assist with our knowledge and experience of how to build a hydrogen valley. And we have, of course, our colleagues from the New Energy Coalition in Groningen, but also from Enflux. Petrus is here and Leonor is here. We really are ready to share this knowledge and experience with you to maybe welcome Estonia as the second hydrogen valley in Europe. More particular on the subject of aviation fuels, last year the Dutch company, I think somebody's talking online, but last year the Dutch company Sky Energy visited Estonia to see the potential to cooperate of building a production facility for sustainable aviation fuels. And the company considered that Estonia should really seriously consider bringing sustainable aviation fuels production facilities to Estonia. With biomass, sustainable biomass being one of the main sources for it. As we all know, sustainable aviation fuel is a key to achieve the net zero targets, CO2 emission targets for the aviation industry in 2050. As with many other new renewable energy sources, the principle of first movers gain the most is, I think, also applicable here for the SAF. We have witnessed this with the offshore wind energy in the Netherlands. When we started, it was very new and not on a very large scale, but I'm also very proud to say that now we in the Netherlands basically have 25% of the offshore wind energy sector in Europe. So there's definitely a potential and there's definitely future in it if you are there early enough and are willing to invest in something. Maybe because when people think about things like sustainable aviation fuel, it almost feels like futuristic, you know, how is this all going to work? But there are already concrete examples. And I just wanted to mention that very recently there was a SAF-fueled flight which took off from Eelde Airport, which is in Groningen or near Groningen, and it was actually operated by the Estonian company Nux Air, and they flew on 39% SAF fuels during this flight. So it is definitely possible to do this. And I think this definitely is a landmark for Estonian-Netherlands cooperation when it comes to sustainable aviation fuels. We're going to listen to a lot of experts. I'm not one of them. I just wanted to conclude here by saying that I want to shout out to the Estonian Aviation Cluster and really commend you for taking the lead and showing the way forward. But of course, together with the Estonian Hydrogen Association, the Parliament's Aviation Group, of course, Timo, I can't really see you. Oh, there you are. I thought you were sitting. Of course, Timo Suslov from the Parliament and Enflux for working on the aviation cluster's hydrogen perspective. Again, thank you all for being here and also online for showing such a great interest in this very important subject, and I wish you all a very inspirational seminar. Thank you, Aita.
And now I give the floor to Mr. Timo Suslov, the lead to the Aviation Support Group in the Parliament, securing the broad commitment on the political level.
Dear Ambassador, Mr. Minister, Ladies and gentlemen, dear guest, I'm pleased to welcome you on behalf of Riigikogu from Aviation Support Group. At today's seminar, we will get insight into the climate-neutral aviation. Living in this moment, health crisis, energy crisis, war in Ukraine, we need to think about alternatives in energy. Energy independence is very, very important. About a year ago at the seminar in Jõhvi, we will talk with the aviation cluster about the new directions in aviation. And I found the following in my notes: electric and hydrogen planes, electric taxis, and that Estonia has the opportunity to be a pilot country. Looking at the passion, how the aviation cluster works, it's quite real that in that small country in Estonia, we will become a pilot country. With its small size, Estonia is flexible, and as a country, we are able to make rapid turns, as we did in the field of IT. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's not fly low, let's fly high. Thank you for your attention.
And hello from the screens. Now we will head the microphone over to Brussels to Mr. Henrik Hollolei. So happy to meet you once again, although over web this time. So, our guy in the European Commission, DG Mobility and Transport, the key figure getting things rolling in the Commission. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I, of course, wish you all a very good afternoon. And I'm sure that you're going to have some interesting discussions on a topic which is most topical, as one could put it. Let me try to give you a general framework of where we are and what actually are the tools that we have in our hand in order to make aviation also more sustainable. I think that first and foremost we need to see that the aviation sector needs to significantly change the way it is powered, and it has to cut its emissions significantly in order to maintain its license to grow. When we look at the challenges that are currently in front of the aviation, of course, we are now in the process of the recovery from the pandemic and, of course, other effects, including the Russian aggression in Ukraine. But the most important long-term element is the aviation sustainability. If there is no more sustainable aviation, we simply don't have the license to grow. And of course, complacency is not an option. Unfortunately, the airlines in the last decade did not do sufficiently in order to address the issue, and they moved from being offensive and actually show what they have been doing into now being defensive in trying to explain why they are not yet being able to transfer into a more sustainable aviation. But of course, the reality is very clear. Aviation is very difficult to decarbonize. There is no magic wand. There is absolutely no one silver bullet, and the decarbonization of aviation actually depends on many different measures. One of the reasons why there was also a certain degree of complacency was the fact that aviation, many said, oh, but it's only 2% of the overall CO2 emissions, or about 2.5, which doesn't seem as a big figure. But the problem is that now actually the relative share of aviation in the total emissions is growing, and that's why there is also far more focus on the more sustainability which is needed in the sector for the longer term. So what are the different measures that you have? I mean, the measures, as we call it, this is the basket of measures, and the basket consists of many different elements. Of course, one comes with the manufacturers. One comes with the aircrafts. It's clear that the modern aircrafts are, of course, far more efficient and far more sustainable than the old generation aircraft. If you look at the 320 family Neo, for example, or MAX in the Boeing 737 family, you can see that they are already much more sustainable. And there is still a lot to do with the aircraft itself. The airframe can become lighter, you can use more of the composite materials, and of course this is one way to add some of the additional savings when it comes to the CO2. Then you have the engines. The engines have changed a lot over the last decades. I mean, the new engines are 25, even 30% more efficient than they used to be in the past. But there is also as far as you can go with that. I mean, the leading engine producers, GE and Rolls-Royce, of course, are doing a lot of innovation in that front, and also, of course, the other engine producers at the same time. But again, it is something which is extremely important. It is something where innovation makes a big change. But again, you can only be able to cut a certain amount of the emissions. On top of that, the engines are also able to run on the sustainable aviation fuels. Current certification is 50%, and I think in the next 5 to 6 years, you basically have in the market engines which are also 100% SAF compatible. Even one could say that today most of the engines are 100% SAF compatible, but they are not certified beyond the 50%. So that is definitely going to happen. Air traffic management, another element, because for the moment we see that in Europe, with the delivery of the single European sky and avoiding the zigzags in the air and having the most efficient flight paths and routes, as well as the best approach to the airports, you can actually cut 10% of the emissions in aviation. Again, there is a low-hanging fruit. Unfortunately, the governments have been fighting against that, and despite of the best efforts we are doing, single European sky still remains very much of a dream than a reality. And this is, of course, extremely unfortunate, because we could make a big change by delivering on that. Of course, here, what helps us again is innovation. We will see that you would have much more use of the artificial intelligence, you have much more use of the automated systems, and I think that this is also going to make the flying more efficient. But without the single European sky, we really will not be able to make a leap when it comes to the efficiency in the air. And of course, in order to support that, we have our innovation project, CESAR, which is there for the last 15 years in order to deliver the modernization in air traffic management, and which has already produced over that period more than 110 solutions which are actually deployed in the real life and which have contributed to the cut of the emissions. Then we have the market-based measures. We have the emission trading system, which is applicable within the flights in the European Union airspace, and which is also helping as a market measure to cut the emissions. And on the other hand, of course, on the global scale, we have the CORSIA, the carbon offsetting and reduction scheme, which was agreed and being deployed under the ICAO umbrella, and where today you have 88 countries who have joined the voluntary phase, and we hope that by the end of this year it will be about 111 countries again. Aviation emissions are a global problem. You need first and foremost the global solutions, but it doesn't mean that regions like Europe can be more ambitious. And then we come to the most important component, and that is the sustainable aviation fuels. And we see that by 2050, when we want to have the aviation in Europe carbon neutral, and many other countries, many other constituencies have also joined in with that, about 2/3 of all the emission reductions will be achieved through the deployment of the sustainable aviation fuels. It is a long way to go. Today, the share of the aviation, sustainable aviation fuels in the jet fuel blend is about 0.1%. And we want to see that it is going to change. Then we need to ramp up the production. We need to really focus on that in the next decade. And then, of course, to make sure that the airlines are also uplifting the fuel when they are refueling in the European airports. So for that, we have currently the Refuel EU aviation proposal, which is being discussed by the Parliament and the Council, and which sees that by 2025, you would have 2% of the fuel mix, and by 2030, 5% of the total fuel mix, which would be sustainable aviation fuels in the blend that will be available in the European airports. And when we talk about sustainable aviation fuels, again, This is something where you have, the definition, it is actually quite wide. It is about synthetic fuels, it is about e-fuels, but first and foremost, it is about sustainable biofuels. And again, drop-in biofuels will play a significant role in this overall SAF basket. And of course, hydrogen that we will see as a good potential for aviation of the future, but where we still have quite a long way to go. And production of green hydrogen, again, something which I think will open up a lot of possibilities, including, of course, for Estonia in the future. Last but not least, I will mention innovation. I have mentioned innovation many times, and innovation has always been integral part of the aviation. Aviation has been in the forefront of bringing innovation forward. And I think we are seeing many new developments. We are seeing the development of aircrafts, engines, but I think that what we're also going to see is the expansion of our airspace. It is going to be much wider than it was in the past. It is going to expand to upwards and downwards. And in the upwards, of course, the supersonic will make a return in the next decade. But more importantly, in the low altitude airspace, we are going to see the innovative air mobility or urban air mobility, or in a very simple terms, the drones, which I think will play a very significant role of the future. We need to make sure that we integrate them to our airspace architecture. We need to make sure that we will deliver on safety, security, and of course, the privacy, and to achieve the public acceptance. But these kind of new type of aircrafts will definitely also deliver on the sustainability. They will revolutionize also the urban mobility. And I think that in the next decades, there is a lot that's going to happen in that front. We have currently finished the work of the European Drone Leaders Group, which has delivered its vision for 2030. And we will be putting on the table still this year the European Drone Strategy 2.0. And I'm very happy to say that when it comes to the regulatory framework in terms of safety of drones, when it comes to the use space, the airspace where the drones are operating, Europe is by far number one in the world, way ahead of any other constituencies. And we want to keep it like that. And that's why it's also very important that we will do anything we can in order to support testing and trialing. I think there is an opportunity also for Estonia, because these are kind of new developments where nobody has got the competitive edge, and the ones which are more open, the ones which are more ready, and the ones which have an attractive framework can bring a lot of players to their markets, and of course help to develop also this new type of aviation. Unfortunately, my time is up. These topics easily could fill next 5 hours, but needed to condense it in 10 minutes. So I tried to do my utmost. And again, very happy to take any questions if you have time. But otherwise, I wish you a very fruitful discussion. And of course, I'm very grateful also to the Estonian Aviation Cluster. It's been a great initiative and something which has really focused on what Estonia can do, being also very proactive and trying to develop a sector which has a huge potential everywhere in the world, including in Estonia. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Yes, we are over time, but I think the audience will forgive us for going over time. And we would open the floor for questions. Just to kick off with the first one, something you've also mentioned in your presentation. As we see that we have new technologies being developed, and we seek the opportunity to test them. So it all has to go hand in hand with certification and regulation. So can you provide us some insight of how Estonia perhaps can also contribute to this process, and in order to really have the opportunity to test the new innovation that could become the new reality, but in order to really test it in the environment that really protects everybody in the process?
Well, thank you very much. I think it is a very good question, and I think first and foremost, of course, with aviation, safety is the #1 priority. Always have been, always remains, and that is the reason why we can go to the aircraft or any other kind of aeroplane and feel secure and feel safe at the same time. And but that also is concerning the new technologies, meaning that we need to make sure that the safety certification is done very, very thoroughly, very meticulously, and that any new development that we roll out will also continue to maintain the highest level of safety for the traveling public, but also for the aviation sector more generally. When we deal with that on the European level, then obviously it's the European Aviation Safety Agency. And let me just bring you one example. For example, the use of hydrogen, liquefied hydrogen in the aircraft as potentially powering the aircraft, which can happen, let's say, in 10, 15 years. Then we already now have to start the certification. We already have to take the next steps forward. When it comes to drones, as I said already, I mean, we have the general safety framework. We have also the general framework for the airspace architecture, and we have also the regulation for the U-space, the low altitude airspace. And there, of course, I think that every country which is ready to open up and ready to allow the testing and trialing can continuously contribute, because we are learning only by doing, and we are learning only when the tests and the trials as such are being rolled out. And here, of course, Estonia has to take a very proactive approach. There is nothing to hold back. I mean, today you have real-life testing going on in many constituencies. Singapore, for example, the Google Wing is operating in Helsinki and in some other constituencies, Australia, and they're also looking at other places where to do that. And that means that you have to be proactively yourself making it or approaching the different operators, and also telling them why, for example, they should opt for coming to Estonia, what we can offer, and why it is a good place to do that. And that would also mean, of course, that by doing this, you get also a very also the regulators and the safety regulators, they will get very useful, unique data, which can be also shared at the European level, and which definitely helps us in order to better frame all the necessary regulatory aspects that continue to provide us the safest and securest aviation in Europe.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Yes, please.
Yeah. Hello, Henrik. Good to see you on the other side of the screen. You don't hear me. Okay. Hey, hello? Hi, Henrik. Let's see. Turn on. Yes. Things look better if they are turned on. Hi, Henrik. This is Andres. Good to see you on the other side of the screen. I have just one question. What do you think could go wrong or hold us back on this path to the future, if anything?
Well, good afternoon, Andres, and good to hear from you and see you also via the screen. What can hold us back? Nothing. I don't think that if we ourselves will not put the barriers to our thinking, then there's nothing that can hold us back. I think that the attitude should be that the glass is half full and we can do, which is not commonly European attitude, but I think that we need to definitely try to embrace that to the extent possible. But to try to be maybe a step more serious, I would say, what can hold us back, or rather, what can keep us back or take us back years, would be, of course, if something happens. If there will be an accident, if there will be a very serious incident. And we have seen that in this case, you have the effect that it might take years in order to get back where you are, because that is something that will fragment the public perception and the public acceptance. For aviation sector, since the creation of the civil aviation more than 100 years ago, I mean, safety has always been the key thing. And every time you have some kind of a major accident, it is something which, at least for some of the traveling public, will have some kind of an effect. We have learned from these a lot, and that's why aviation has become safer, but it always has also had a setback. And even if we roll out the new technologies, and I don't know, I mean, a drone carrying, a test drone carrying a human being suddenly crashes, then obviously it is something which probably would stop the development for quite some time, and needs to take the regulators also back to see whether there are safety flaws, or whether there are some kind of operational problems, or whether there are some kind of technical problems. So this is usually the worst thing that can happen. And even though the loss of life in aviation is very, very rare, it happens, and it always is a very, very tragic event, and something that the regulators have to take seriously, but something which also has an effect on the fast development of the rolling out of new technologies.
Thank you. So
and just to say on that one, I mean, as you saw not long ago, I mean, we had a massive problem on a global scale with the Boeing MAX aircraft, with the MCAS system, which was an innovation, which actually was supposed to make the plane more safer, but where there were, let's say, some issues in relation to making pilots understand that technology is there to help them, and to bring the pilot and the technology together. And of course, this resulted in the loss of life, more than 350 people, 2 fatal accidents in a very short period of time, something that is unheard of in the civil aviation, and an aircraft, a very good aircraft in principle, was grounded for a long time, and only now has been recertified and has entered back in the market, being of course safer. But I think this is a good example of where actually you ended up having a major loss of life, but at the same time, Boeing as a company has not yet even recovered and is still making huge losses because of loss of trust. And trust is something that in aviation is extremely important, and you always need to do anything in order to maintain.
That in turn brings us back to certification and safety regulations. So therefore, you are in a tricky position to safeguard the broad enough conditions in order to be able to innovate. On the other hand, to safeguard our own safety. So good luck with that, and we try to be on board to support the Commission in its efforts.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and all the best to Estonia, and keep on innovating and pushing forward.
Thank you. So our next speaker will be Mr. Petros Postma from the Netherlands. So therefore, a front runner, as the Netherlands is, providing their support to build up the Estonian aviation cluster's vision into becoming an aviation test bed for climate neutrality.
Well, thank you, Lise, and thank you, Ambassador, Minister, and everyone here for being in the opportunity to speak to you again. A lot of you I have met before because we as a company, Enflux, have been working in Estonia on the hydrogen strategy for Port of Tallinn, the aviation action perspective, and now are actually also developing the hydrogen valley in Estonia, which I will refer to a very small bit at the end of my presentation. So what we were asked to do is provide the aviation sector or cluster with a concrete action perspective specifically on hydrogen. So that is where I will go into, and I'm looking for a, can I manage my own presentation, or do I have to say forward? Ah, here. Let's see. If this works. Not yet, not yet. Sorry guys, do I have to pinpoint somewhere? Yes, here we go. It works, thank you. So, specifically a hydrogen action perspective. So why hydrogen? That's the first question we have to answer, right? And it's not that we believe hydrogen is the solution to everything. Electrification and efficiency are the first solutions, but at the same time, hydrogen can come in very handy if you, for instance, have to have a very much large amount of capacity or energy, or you have to store your energy. And I think that it is a very simple fact that from around 2030 onwards, Estonia as a country will produce far more energy than its primary consumption does, and it will be produced intermittently, and your grid will never be able to accommodate that amount of energy. So the production of hydrogen as a way of storing the excess energy you as a country are going to produce is going to be operational on a huge scale from 2030 onwards. And even in the coming years, at this moment in time, we have 200 megawatts of solar in the country that is not connected to the grid because the grid cannot accommodate this. So you have huge amounts of energy that will be converted into hydrogen in order to store it and do sensible things with it. And sensible things doing with hydrogen is about huge capacities and other things we will go into now. And first one is, of course, sustainable aviation fuels. Don't look at the scheme. The simple thing it says is the longer the flight and the heavier the carrier, the faster you will need sustainable aviation fuel. The smaller the carrier, the smaller the amount of passengers and the smaller the distance, the more liable or thinkable it will be that you will use batteries or hydrogen. So hydrogen will be, to some extent, a direct fuel for aviation in some time in the future. And companies are developing this. And this is something we will come back to shortly. And the other thing is that hydrogen will be a large component of sustainable aviation fuels. Well, you as a country have a huge volume of green carbon in the form of biomass. You are treating and working with that on a huge scale at this moment. So you have the potential to combine that green carbon with the green hydrogen you will produce as a country and produce sustainable aviation fuel. No, that is not commercial today, but it will become commercial in time as the EU sets its mandates, as efficiency will grow, and as the alternative, fossil feedstocks, will become more expensive over time. So, concrete use case for aviation as a fuel, short-term, short distances, direct hydrogen, and as a component in sustainable aviation fuels. It is as simple as that. But of course, in aviation cluster, you also have operations and services. Well, here at this moment in time in Estonia, we can safely say that the operations and services being handled in the aviation cluster can be managed electrically. And that is more efficient than hydrogen because it's a direct use case. So for the short run, we don't see any reason to really uptake hydrogen-driven things in operations and services. What we can do is learn from what is happening abroad. In the Netherlands, for instance, we have the first ground power units being driven by hydrogen, the first pushbacks being driven by hydrogen. So if there would be performances of those facilities that are even better than electric, let's learn about that and see about it in the future. But there's no reason for Estonia to very much focus on that at this moment in time. But there is another one, and that's interesting. And this is where the story actually starts building up. Because as an aviation sector, you have a direct responsibility for the aviation itself, but also to some extent to all the infrastructure and the transport and the cargo and the people being transported to and from the airports. And there are very relevant and direct use cases for hydrogen in the short run. Because there is a huge program being developed called 10T, and that is about hydrogen fueling stations for trucks along a corridor that stretches from Estonia through the Baltic states and Poland and Germany, even to the Netherlands. So there you can add value in using your capacity as an aviation cluster to facilitate the fueling infrastructure needed for the sustainability of transport to and from the airports. And the same goes for public transport, because mainly in the regional longer distances, when we talk about public transport, so trains and regional buses and the like, hydrogen will be one of the viable solutions for the long run. And also for that you will need fueling infrastructure. Well, why am I saying this? Because in our action perspective for the aviation cluster, the functional first thing is that aviation cluster has space, huge amounts of space. In that space we can realize large-scale onshore solar. And with that solar capacity that will not be fully able to be accommodated by the grid, we can start producing hydrogen. Not for the direct use in aviation today, but directly for that logistics, for the fueling stations that will be realized in time. So if you can contribute to that transport sector, you also contribute to a hydrogen infrastructure being developed. And that is the value proposition. Because if you work on a hydrogen infrastructure, then aviation companies will see that Estonia has a functional and working hydrogen structure. Okay, that means that if I am piloting my hydrogen-driven planes, and we have a country where the hydrogen infrastructure is in place, that is a value proposition where we can attract the first hydrogen-driven airplanes. Yeah, so it's an indirect one for the long run. And secondly, really invest in that question, can we do sustainable aviation fuels in an economic way in this country? So if we invest in the infrastructure for the short run and the feasibility on sustainable aviation fuel, we will lay the groundwork for the coming years where more innovations on hydrogen-driven drones, on hydrogen-driven air taxis and all the like can be piloted in Estonia. Start with the infrastructure and provide the comfort for the market to further develop. And in the end, that will be part of this systematic approach we are working on with, at this moment, 4 regions, 1 university and 5 of the biggest companies in Estonia to develop the hydrogen valley in Estonia, the first nationwide hydrogen valley across the globe, where we say that there are so many production sites, onshore solar in the short run, offshore wind in the long run, and use cases being developed, not only in aviation, but also in transport and in shipping and other use cases. And if you, as an aviation cluster, can realize onshore solar to a large degree in the different sites you have and the space you have, you will be a driving force for the whole hydrogen ecosystem that is being developed. So this is the way hydrogen cluster can be a driving force for Hydrogen Valley in Estonia. Thank you.
So, questions from the audience? If I can't see any hands, so the real question, how to make it all...
The microphone is not on, I think. It is on?
It is?
Okay, sorry.
So, the driving question, how to make it all commercial?
Yep. Yeah, and I think the simple and true answer is it will not be commercial in the coming 6 years. Because we don't know yet in this country how to very efficiently use or produce electrolyzers, how to very efficiently use hydrogen in the different sectors or in aviation. We have to learn that. And we have the time to learn that, because if these huge-scale offshore wind parks will come online in 28, 29, 2030, then we have these large volumes of hydrogen to be processed in this country. So that gives us a window of opportunity for the coming 6 years to learn how to do that. And that is not commercial, that is an economic long-term strategy. So our challenge is to be committed to this strategy, to make it commercial in the long run, and to make it inevitable in the long run.
So, any questions from the audience? Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Petrus. I have a question on one of your slides. You showed where different elements like SAF or electric will replace the current jet fuel, but long haul was still, I think, SAF. So do you think there is also a solution long haul, what is going to be something different?
No, I don't think there is going to be another solution for long haul, but I'm not a specialist in this case. I think we will keep on needing sustainable aviation fuels forever if we want to fly large volumes over large distances anyhow. So that market will be there in the long run. And well, the theoretically beautiful thing is that we are technically able to produce kerosene out of thin air by capturing the CO2 out of the air, by capturing the energy, converting that to hydrogen and providing kerosene with it. We can do that. And it may be that we will be able to do that in an efficient way as well in the long run, but for the coming 10, 15, 20 years, we will need biomass as a basis for sustainable aviation fuel anyhow.
So, thank you. One more question. We have gone over time, 20 minutes, so if you're ready to skip the break afterwards, do you want to ask the question? No? Okay. That was not to scare you off. So, as the question was, how to make the kind of long-term vision stay intact, we need partners. And actually, before aviation, we had Tallinn Port to put together their vision of climate neutrality and hydrogen. So therefore, I'm happy to give the floor to Mrs. Hellemai and to present the port's view.
Meanwhile, thank you. My name is Hellemai Metsal, and yes, I'm representing port, landside, or actually seaside of the transport mode. Hopefully it works. Few words about Port of Tallinn itself as a company. We are the biggest port authority in Estonia. We are a listed company, but the majority of the shares are owned by state, so we're partly state-owned. We have 4 business fields: passenger traffic, we serve passengers, we have cargo, we have shipping, we are vessel owners as well, and we have a little bit land to develop real estate, both in industrial parks and in Old City Harbour as a real estate, traditional real estate development plans. Our harbours are actually located all over Estonia. You can see the locations. And the vessels we are serving are served by the mainland and islands, main islands. And we own an icebreaker as well. And those vessels are owned by our subsidiaries, TS Laevad, who are serving the connection between mainland and islands, and TS Shipping as a icebreaker owner. And then we have waste management services as well as the subsidiaries. As a sustainable company, as we would like to have to think us and we are going, we have this kind of sustainable development goals marked as and corporate sustainable responsibilities as well. We have started to map our CO2, what we are emitting, and which are emitted by our partners which are working in our harbours. And as you can see from both slides, that vessels or the vessel traffic is the most biggest one, which creates a carbon greenhouse gas emissions. So, in that sense, we have to define ourselves as a ports as well, who are the ports? And ports are not anymore as we have used to be as a landlord type of port, which just providing infrastructure and just collecting money from our partners. That's not even true anymore. Ports are connection nodes. Ports connect people, products, and countries as airports. And ports' role has been changing recently quite rapidly. Ports do more. Ports do different things. Ports are the nodes of critical infrastructure and strategic value. So we are the energy hubs, but we will facilitate more renewable energy as well. So we are the community builders. We are not as much using ourselves as much energy, but we are building the community. And that actually drives us to the idea that we should be the forerunners of this kind of new developments, things like hydrogen itself as well. It was actually 2 years ago when I was introduced to hydrogen itself by Port of Hamburg. And it has been a very, very quick journey for us. Since last year, together with our Dutch colleagues and the help of Embassy of Estonian Dutch Embassy, we created a hydrogen strategy with the help of Antwerps. And from that, we mapped ourselves, our position in that new field. So we are the central node to the new hydrogen ecosystem. We are the first introducers to the field itself, like starting the value chain, linking different parties, giving a little bit push to the different parties which are just looking around and trying to find new ways how to cope with energy, lack of energy or lack of courage, lack of money even, because together we are more and more stronger. So it doesn't, okay. And now it was too quick. Okay, so which way we should actually start? By building up our, okay, it doesn't work very well. By starting to giving ourselves example by ourselves, we have a lot of different kind of port vessel, port fleet, so that we can actually change that for the renewable and even by not hydrogen-fueled vessels. That is one step to what we can do ourselves. But we alone are not as big user or big facilitator as well. But together with our partners, we have collected some ideas which we have listed in different programs as well. One of the Clean European Alliance as well. So this is a few projects which we have combined together with our partners. One is, I have to just explain that OPACE means onshore power supply. So it is one that is very specific to ports to provide big vessels who are mooring on the quayside more than 2 hours, onshore power. But in Estonia, in Tallinn, there is a lack of onshore power. So we have to find a very good solution how to provide that power in a very sustainable way. I don't say it can be done the conventional way, and it will be even less expensive, but still, is it in a long term a good choice? So that was one issue that maybe we should consider to have, or at least have a solution which use hydrogen to create the power for the vessels, and then maybe later, in a later phase where the greener fuels are more used for the vessels as well, we can retrofit much easier for, let's say, for a bunker vessel for greener fuels and hydrogen. Then, of course, I need help. Doesn't work. Then, of course, as I told, we have several vessels, altogether 5 vessels and 1 icebreaker. TS Laevad is moving a lot of people, 2 million people, all around here between mainland and islands, and they are just conventional hybrid operational. They can be turned to a hybrid vessels to use more greener fuels, and one option is hydrogen. That is actually a very well prepared project. We even applied for money that, but it wasn't successful in order to have investment decision. So it is one end of the value chain what we can actually provide. And then, of course, we have to aim high. And this is a very high flying idea, that we have a regional terminal in Paldiski for hydrogen. It is an idea phase, but it has some potential in a long term. Next one. Sorry. We have lack of time, and still we have to deal with these kind of things. And in smaller scale, we have the same opportunities in Muuga terminal as well. This is one. Mm-hmm. Yes. But meanwhile, these were listed already last year, but meanwhile we have just studying and looking for different kind of feasibility studies for different kind of challenges what we are scoping. We have slowed down a little bit because this decision should be done very carefully. So we are just working with all those 4 major projects in order to have this kind of small parts together with and listing some partners what we have already discussed with. And one project we have established again is for just accelerating the project by contributing for the new legislation what is needed for hydrogen itself as well. These are a list of our partners, but of course it's not just that what's related to ports. There is a lot of opportunities which has not been, let's say, very well discovered, but which are very well connected. I don't know, I'm not good with the gadget here. Of course, Rail Baltic. We have Rail Baltic starts, we like to say starts at Muuga Harbour. And it goes throughout Estonia towards Central Europe. So it has been considered to build as electrical railroad, but there is a connection to Muuga Harbour itself as well, and there is not wired one. So maybe there is a very good use for locomotive using hydrogen. Then, of course, the next slide is about unused opportunities yet to discover. Next slide. Yes, this is a very good picture from 3 years old conference, and I'm unfortunate I have to say that it hasn't been changed. This is a location of ports which are used for serving offshore wind farms. Do you see a difference here? So there is lack of those kind of harbors in Baltic Sea. So if we are going to build a offshore wind farms, so there is a lot of need for those kind of services from port side as well. Palun vajuta, ilmselt on ikkagi abi vaja. So this is the pictures what we have planned here in Baltic Sea. And next one shows our opportunities, our ambitions to become one of those servicing bases in Paldiski South Harbour and Saaremaa Harbour. This is a new one because they are very well located to the sites. So there is a synergy between those activities, and all those aspects should be looked at if we are going to develop offshore wind farms. Next slide, please. Next slide. This is, I would like to say that this is our golden club, because this is a club of different ports around the Baltic Sea and North Sea, Port of Rotterdam, Hamburg, Rønne, Gdynia, and Port of Tallinn. And we have an ambition to establish a green corridor in Northern Europe and Baltic Sea. And it means that we are just mapping out those different kind of options and availability of greener fuel for this route, what we have here, in order to attract vessels and vessel owners to change their fuels into the greener ones. It doesn't mean only hydrogen, it means ammonia, it means methanol as well, but these are all for the greater goal for all of us. And this cooperation between these partners is done just within a year. And hopefully it will continue, and we can show our outcome already in this summer when our first pre-feasibility study is ready. Yes, I know, but and that's my last slide as well. So. And we haven't not sitting just on our chairs. We have been one of the initiators to the Estonian Hydrogen Valley. I would love to say that it is Estonian Hydrogen Valley, and we are pretty much contributing to that as well. So, unfortunately, yes, technical reasons. I would love to have always these are challenges what we all have, and this is our future if we cope those challenges all together.
Ran into the same problem with IT this morning, so I think the Estonian women are cursed today.
Yes, we are. Always. Yes.
So, I'm sorry we don't have time for the questions, but as you can see, we should have a separate seminar for maritime sector.
Yeah.
So, therefore, I would like to invite our next speaker, thank you, to talk about the fuel side. So, from Neste, our partner from Finland. So, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's really great to be here. It's extremely great to be here face to face. So actually meeting people after the 2 quite tough years, or 3 probably already. My name is Heidi Peltonen. I'm leading sustainable partnerships at Neste, especially in Finland and Baltics. So really representing the business side, talking to airlines, talking to corporates, how to reduce emissions across the aviation value chain. Let's see if the Finnish women have a better luck in changing the slides. I won't go through to Neste in detail. I don't want to give you a corporate presentation. Maybe just to highlight that we as a company have really, this is one of the key reasons why I joined the company 9 years ago. We've put sustainability into the core. We've invested into renewables already in 90s, and I think that 2020, 94% of our profit coming from renewables kind of proves that point, that sustainability can really be a good business if you can see the value and also increase the value to your customers as well. Okay. So what is sustainable aviation fuel? I think most of you know this. I won't go into detail, but maybe just to highlight that there has been a lot of discussion today about how we need all the solutions, how we need to utilize the solutions available today. And the SAF that I'm representing here, it really is a solutions available that we can really start using right now, and many of the airlines and companies already are. The emission reductions is up to 80% when used as a 100% product, which has also been discussed today. We as Neste are actually part of an investigation. Could we start using 100% products at the airports and in the airplanes? Drop-in solution, existing infrastructure, those have also been highlighted regarding hydrogen. And I think this is one of the key factors that companies can utilize the existing, whether it's a diesel vehicle in road transport or the existing aircraft in aviation side. And currently, we have a capacity of 100,000 tons. Starting next year with the Singapore expansion, it will be 1.4 million tons of SAF. So increasing quite strongly, I would say. And as there has been a lot of discussion about technologies, I bet that our innovation people would be even better at talking about this. But today, of course, waste and residues play a really crucial role, and that's the reason how we can have SAF available. We can have those flights with the blended SAF. We are investigating and studying quite a lot of municipal solid waste, lignocellulosic, and many others as a potential feedstock, and they are probably closer to commercialization than maybe hydrogen is from our perspective. But then someone actually said it really well, that it will take some years, but we need to be prepared. We need to have cases, we need to have pilots, we need to have partners. I think in Finland we've already identified that all the big players in road transport are dying to have hydrogen as a solution to pilot with us. So that's definitely something we are looking into really strongly already today. And I wanted to also highlight that we got the EU Innovation Fund to develop in our refinery in the production process with green hydrogen. And of course, this is a great way for Neste to reach our carbon neutrality target by 2035, but at the same time, it gives us a great opportunity to investigate how we could actually start producing electric fuels at the Porvoo refinery. So kind of looking this from the both angles already from the day one that we are investing into hydrogen. There has also been, I really enjoyed the discussions before we started the event as well, and there was a lot of discussion about the value chain, the end customers, Microsoft, EY, Salesforces, who are pushing because they have set really ambitious targets to meet their customers' also requests and demands. So the way that we at Neste see this is that we need the whole value chain. We need the airlines, we need the end customers, we need all the airport players to make this happen actually, whether it's SAF today or hydrogen in the future, but really emphasizing the partnerships across the value chain. And something I didn't take here is we have also developed an offering directly so that, for example, Deloitte can come to us and buy SAF, and then we just ensure the whole process, for example, with Finnair or Lufthansa or any of the other airlines. So going to the end customer directly as well to make the transformation quicker. Great. I also wanted to raise one Baltic operator who has been using SAF. Air Baltic made their first Neste sustainable aviation fueling last year, but have been using SAF for a longer time already. And that's one partnership that will definitely increase in the future as their commitment towards SAF is increasing. Finnair is another example, Lufthansa, Norwegian. There is many players who are already flying today with sustainable aviation fuel and offering that especially on the B2B side. This is actually my last slide. So once more, we need the regulation, we need the incentives, we need the governmental support, but at the same time, I'm really representing the voluntary market and the end customers. We also need those forerunner companies and airlines who are willing to act even if there is not the process yet in place. So really highlighting that we need all of this and we need all the solutions as well. Thank you.
I hope this works, right? No. Is it? Yeah. No, it is working. Okay. Thank you. So I hope we have some questions from the audience. Yes, please.
Hi. Just wanted to understand where are your production sites are at the moment, which are producing SAF at the moment, or will produce?
Yes. So at the moment, Rotterdam, and starting next year, Singapore as well.
Nothing from Porvoo at the moment?
Not currently producing, but of course we have terminals there that we are utilizing. For example, at Helsinki-Vantaa, we are delivering SAF to airlines. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, any other questions? No? So, if you produce the fuels, we use them, but we have a lot of green feedstock. So, what could be the one thing that would make us attractive to you to get the next billion investment here?
Good question. First of all, we already gather quite a lot of feedstock from the Baltic countries. We've got collaborations with McDonald's and Hesburgers and many others who basically support in producing renewables. When it comes to production and investments here, I think it does come down to how we can increase the volumes and how we can increase the demand, basically. But I think Neste is all the time looking for future investments and looking how we can scale this. So definitely something to consider, but at the moment there is no plans.
Okay, we will have to make ourselves more attractive then.
This event is already making it, I think, making the point. Thank you.
Thank you. So, because we have run over our time, we make a little amendment to the agenda. I hope you don't oppose. If we skip the presentation as a cherry on the cake to be the last one by the person of the year on hydrogen, Mr. Jorgo Chatkakimarkis, for the last, and therefore give the floor to our Minister of Entrepreneurship and IT.
Thank you. If the audience agrees, of course. Yes, I really like the event. And you know why? It has grown far bigger than I expected. Well, maybe that was my low expectation, but usually my expectations are not low, those people who know. I think it's really cool that we started already to talk not only about the aviation, what I was prepared to, as a passenger or as a consumer, but it already quickly went to the port, the maritime, also the fuels from the manufacturer's point of view. And for me, if there is just one line or couple of words what captures it all, is that we are facing a disruptive change. This is what we are talking here. It's not about incremental improvements in the fuel efficiency. It's, I think, again, it's always good to speak after the experts because they have then laid the ground and done all the necessary work. But it's, for me, it's like in a car manufacturing or a car industry. I mean, combustion engine is dead from disruptive change point of view, at least for a majority part, if we look forward or fast forward 5-10 years from now. And that, I think, is important perspective. We are not talking about what happens tomorrow or what becomes available tomorrow. It's about what is available in 5 years from now or in 10 years from now, and what we can do today and what we must do today in order to be prepared and not sort of then running behind once the change has already happened. If you think back to 2007, why this year was significant? Many reasons, but any guess? 2007? Okay, well, first, iPhone. iPhone changed fundamentally how we operate and communicate in a society. How many people knew it back then, that this will going to change fundamentally how we operate? I guess very few. Maybe some evangelists, some people who thought that this is going to be a cool stuff. There happened to be also financial crisis in 2007, but that's completely beside the today's debate. So this is, I think, really important to have in mind, that this, what we do today is really going to have a huge impact in the future. And like Henrik mentioned in his presentation, it's only 0.1% what is today SAF used as a jet fuel. So to get to I don't know, maybe 100% is too ambitious, but even to 50%, it would imply 500 times increase compared to today's volume. It's a huge business. It's a huge business, and that's why I think we certainly need to look into also in Estonia what we can do in order to be part of this journey. And what I liked really when I listened to people who spoke before me, that in combination, you actually spoke about the ecosystem. It's not that we can do a little bit in aviation and we do a little bit in maritime and then we do something different in cargo on the ground, be it on a rail or on the trucks. But we are talking about the ecosystem of mobility for people, for goods, and this is where we really need to be able to innovate and make Estonia as a test bed. So I know that Sweden and Denmark have set a target that their aviation, domestic aviation, should be carbon neutral by 2030. So 2030 is tomorrow. And then I was last Friday in Hiiumaa. Those who know, Hiiumaa is the second largest island in Estonia, and we happen to have also domestic flights in Estonia. One goes to Saaremaa and the other one goes to Hiiumaa. Now my question to you is, how far is Hiiumaa from Tallinn? Good. It actually was even closer, 20 minutes. 20 minutes, and that is, I think, fundamentally the mindset we need to use. Kilometers don't really matter. The only thing what matters is time to travel, be it for people or be it for goods. And then I thought, okay, in preparation for today's event, so shall we really aim at jet fuel? Or sorry, not jet fuel, but SAF for kind of getting this 20-minute ride CO2 neutral? Or rather, fast forward to 2025 onwards, and air taxi, eVTOL. I think this is, I mean, people already say that I'm crazy, and that's okay, but eVTOL is going to be a solution for many urban air mobility things, and not in too distant future. There are companies who have been claimed, and I very much agree also what Hendrik said about what matters is safety. I mean, we can't fail with an accident on this journey. At least in aviation. I think it's maybe a bit sort of easier in the maritime business where you have bigger safety margins. But I mean, the last thing you want to have is a big disaster and then everybody says, look, stop. This thing is never going to be commercially used. But if we can seriously consider that there are companies who want to certify aviation or air taxis against current civil safety standards in aviation, I mean, this thing is here. It's convenient, it's clean, and more importantly, Estonia is then connected in its entirety by air connection. You may ask, how much does it cost? I don't have a definite answer, but I have been asking this question from one of companies who has promised to commission by 2025 eVTOLs for commercial use. And they have also looked between Helsinki and Tallinn. That's my other point. Tallinn will have two airports. One is named Lennart Meri, and the other one is named Vanda Helsinki. If I can take air taxi from Tallinn and I land at the gate in Helsinki, Estonia has direct flights from here to North America and Asia. It's only in your mind what is capturing. So about the price, I was told that on a cost basis, one-way ticket to Helsinki on eVTOL would be roughly 50, 60 euros. So you add a margin, even if you have 100% margin, for certain segments of passengers, it certainly is acceptable price to pay. And obviously, as we have seen with computing power, as we have seen with PVs or solar panels, wind energy, the unit cost of production has been dramatically falling over time because it is sort of disruptive innovation and the new future. So in the second half of this decade, we will have completely new ballgame. And I really look very much forward that we will be the place to play this game in Estonia for aviation cluster, for maritime business, also for rail and road. And I'm also a strong believer the tunnel between Helsinki and Tallinn is commercially viable. And you know why? I think Port of Tallinn showed passenger numbers between mainland and islands. 2 million people per year. So now think of Tallinn and Helsinki. One has population, Tallinn has 400,000, a little bit more. Helsinki, I think maybe a lady from Neste can help me. What's the population of Helsinki? 500, 600,000? So, okay, combined 1 million. Now, if we have a metro line which has two stops apart, 20 minutes, one stop Helsinki and the other stop Tallinn, and you have 1 million people in intercity public transportation, would you be able to imagine that there will be 50 million passengers per year? Easily. and 50 million passengers per year is a break-even point to make the tunnel viable, at least by some calculations. So, okay, now I have been diverting on many angles, but at least I guess Estonia is ready to be a testbed. We are very much welcoming innovation here. So come, don't be hesitant. We have a great cluster in aviation. We have a great companies in the port business. And we will make tunnel also to happen at one point in the future together with Finland, because the other, and that's my last point, we need people. Ultimately, we need people, and the concept, what we have, the finest Bay area, which is Finland, Estonia, should have the highest talent concentration in the world. Simple. And then we can put Europe firmly on a map. This is where innovation happens, not like in past. So let's build that bright future. Thank you very much.
So, splendid opportunity to ask from the Minister. Or then continue by the coffee cup.
Yes, the second one.
Okay, so let's then take a break. Okay, so thanks a lot, and let's have a short break. Only 10 minutes, please. Thank you. So, just to have a kickstart for the discussion, let me ask you first, Marek. The Hydrogen Association is building the Valley project. So why is aviation relevant, considering its relatively small footprint in the CO2 emissions overall budget? So why is aviation on the map?
Yes, I hope this works. Perfect. Yeah, I think we heard 2% earlier on. I've also heard 4%, and that's the air side usually that's considered. But let's say last year, when the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance launched their project pipeline collection, what we saw were two hubs. One is ports, the other is airports as hubs, and the reason for that is that they're multimodal by nature. It's connecting different modalities, it's connecting land, ground, air, different movement options. Future mobility is perfect for it, so they're micro ecosystems of different companies. And so if you only take, let's say, maritime, but you leave out aviation, then you're not completing the picture, you're not tying them together. So for us, when getting this ecosystem put there, you need to take the hubs, you need to take the actors that are connected to these hubs, and you need to form a full picture. This is why we laid this across the nation, these key centralized hubs that will allow smaller hubs to form. And this, it doesn't matter, is it 2% or 4%? The effect of that can be 20 or 40, that it contributes to the big picture. So I think that was our reasoning behind it, to make sure everybody's on board. Thanks.
And then to continue from the government side, Mr. Sutt. So how do you see the kind of relevance to the entrepreneurship overall development in Estonia from this hydrogen that could be maybe doubled, or how can this value add to our proposition on the maybe European market? Also how it could develop our own economy, and what do you see as the key cornerstones that we have to kind of, from where to start and how to kick off in the best possible way in order to get things really running?
I think we are already running. The question is about the speed. I think direction is okay, probably. Otherwise, if we run in the wrong direction, that's a bit problematic. But this is where I'm fairly confident. Some of you mentioned in the presentations that what you need is a regulation, and that I think is a fair point. Even though for me it's always weird to hear if an industry is asking for regulation, because usually it's other way around, that there is a complaint that it's too heavily regulated and we can't do business. But I think in any new area, you need something. That I think is a legitimate request, and this is where I think the government should also help. If you ask from a broader angle why hydrogen is relevant for Estonia, I think if we agree that this is one of frontier technologies for use, even though it has been in place for quite a while and has been sort of search or research how to make it commercially viable and there, it would be odd to stay out. And I think if there is one characteristic for Estonia throughout the past, say, 30 years, is that we haven't never been dependent on any single industry, but rather it has been bits and pieces at the top level in a number of industries. So it's much more diversified economic structure. And it would be, and that's maybe final point, would be really weird for us to stay out from innovation wagon in this industry, because, as I said in my intervention, we are seeing a disruptive change in technology. It's going to be much faster than the last 25 years. And last 25 years, in terms of technology adoption, have been the fastest in the last 100 years. So it will certainly be a big roller coaster, and it's important to be on it. And again, the more we have industries or associations in these future technology fields, the better we position ourselves, and also the better we can actually attract the talent, which is really key for making these things to happen. Money is always available. I haven't, at least never seen in my 30 years plus career that there is no money. There is always money for great ideas. But the question is, do you have great ideas? And then even more importantly, do you have execution capacity? And this is where people come at the forefront.
Well, we've arrived on the key component of our current discussions on any topic, that is security, and also energy security. As Minister pointed, we have had the approach to not to be dependent upon one sector, but rather to divide the kind of risks into different areas, therefore to be better prepared for potential risks. So my question would be to you, Jaanus. Yes, I see you're expecting it. So quite recently, Estonia adopted the Maritime Special Plan with 7 gigawatts capacity by 2030. So if we say that there's a role for hydrogen and we don't want to be dependent upon external suppliers, if possible, so what would you do, or what would Estonia do with the power supply that exceeds our own needs? So if we really need 2 or 3 gigawatts, what will we do with the rest?
Yes, first of all, I would be very happy if we get these first 1, 2, 3 gigawatts. But the reason why there was more potential, more capacity for offshore wind in the maritime spatial planning is the usual reasons. I mean, not all of it gets realized, not all of it gets realized at the same time. But I mean, looking at where the macro trends are going right now, I would guess that if the grid capacity is full and 7 gigawatts will not fit into our grid, okay, maybe if we have another connection with Finland or with Sweden, but that takes 10-15 years. So then hydrogen or synthetic gases, which hydrogen would also be used to produce them, would be a viable solution. And then you could put it on a ship and sail it wherever you want. But in order for this magnificent future to happen, I would guess that first we need to build these capacities, first on land, looking at the sea, pre-developing it, and then then turning the electricity into new energy carriers.
But if we can overcome that, so what would make us attractive enough? For example, for the SAF flight to fly from Estonia, from Tallinn, what would be the Neste's proposition?
Maybe actually borrowing a little bit, Minister, here about the execution plan. I think that supply is always there when there is demand, and we are operating in many airports across Europe, and there is many airlines flying. So maybe the question is that how do we together find the demand, and whether it's airlines or end customers who are demanding the use of SAF, I think we can investigate the opportunity to supply SAF at Tallinn. And maybe another question is the infrastructure and the existing operators, because at Helsinki-Vantaa, for example, Neste is actually operating by ourselves with trucks and fueling the planes into the wing. So that's maybe another challenge that we need to figure out. But I think overall, when there is demand, we can always find solutions to supply.
Well, as we heard today, on the demand side, we can see that there's help coming from the Commission as well. But over to the audience. Do you have questions for the panel? If not yet, I would ask Petrus. So, from where to start? You had a kind of ecosystem-based analysis presented to us, the overall plan, but to be very concrete, from where to start, step 1, 2.
Okay, how much time do I have for the answer?
Too little.
Okay, well, I really was glad that you, Minister, mentioned also the ecosystem approach, because, well, if we are looking at where to start, we have to have also a picture in the end, in our view. What are we growing towards, right? And if we know that we have a offshore production capacity that is so far much greater than the primary energy use in the country, then we really want to know how to accommodate these volumes of energy that are going to be produced. We know that they cannot be accommodated by the grid, so we know there will be some way to store that energy. That will be hydrogen. That will not be batteries, that will simply be hydrogen. So that gives us time until 2030 to learn how to do this. And there's a very simple way to learn how to do this. Because there are, at this moment, in Narva, in Paldiski, in Pärnu, in Tartu and in Hiiumaa, initiatives to develop large-scale onshore solar parks. 2 of them are actually on airports or on airport grounds. There you have the capacity to produce the first hydrogen, because in all those cases it will be very hard to bring all that energy to the grid. So instead of wasting energy, that's what we are doing now in Estonia on 200 megawatts of solar fields, instead of wasting it, we're going to do something useful with it. So it's not a commercial selling price approach, it's the question how to use energy that we are wasting at this moment in time. And if we can do that at 5 places in Estonia, then we have a reason to realize those first 10T European structure strategy fueling stations in Tartu, in Tallinn and in Pärnu. That's the first 3 ones, and the first little ones are already being developed by Utilitas, because they won that tender, realizing hydrogen fueling stations in Tallinn for taxis. So these are the steps. This is how we are going to develop. Then when we have 5 production places in Estonia and a fueling infrastructure that we will provide with trucks in the first run, then we see also the use of the hydrogen backbone that is being drawn by Elering to be designed and realized by 2030, that connects Latvia, Finland through Tartu, Paldiski, or Tallinn, can see that precisely, and having a route to Pärnu as well. So from 2030 onwards, that huge scale production offshore can be accommodated by pipeline infrastructure. So we start with the trucks and we grow towards the pipeline infrastructure by 2030. And the beautiful thing is that if we develop that infrastructure, the chicken and egg problem is going to be solved. So a lot of producers ask themselves, we don't see the end users, so we don't see reason to realize our electrolyzers. And the end users are saying, well, where's the hydrogen? I can't develop my project. And this is the chicken and egg problem we are solving now in the Hydrogen Valley by really bringing all these people and regions to the table and defining their projects, finding the synergies, finding also development subsidies for them to get this whole system going. And then the use cases we see in SAF, we see in hydrogen as a fuel. We'll have the infrastructure, we'll have the first hydrogen-driven place landing in Tallinn, but we see it in grid stability, we see it in rail, heavy-duty trucks, vehicles. All those use cases are already being initiated in Estonia. And this is the system that's going to work. How? By starting with producing onshore solar in large quantities in the airfields in Estonia. So it's a bit of a complicated answer, but
So,
hope it works.
I hope we've warmed you up. So, questions from the audience, please. Because you have the possibility to ask anything.
I have the similar question about SAF. Why should we produce SAF in Estonia? What is our competition advantage compared to Latvia, Finland, Lithuania? Mažeikiai refinery is already there. The infrastructure is already there. Porvoo has the main infrastructure already to start producing stuff or co-processing stuff. So why should Estonia think about the SAF production at all? What's our advantage here?
Who wants to? The minister has the privilege.
Yeah, I can always figure something out. But look, just now facts. You remember what Henrik Hololei showed? We have currently using 0.1% SAF as a jet fuel. He's very market, as a finance person, I would say, huge. You mentioned you are producing now 100 tons, 100,000.
Yeah,
yes. Now, and then next year 1.3 million.
Yeah.
13 times growth. It's a huge market. I mean, it's a space for everybody. Is it what we need to have? And this is, I think, Petros is much better positioned to answer. But as I understand, if we have, like also Jaanus mentioned, or actually you asked or mentioned in your question, I mean, if we have 7 gigawatt production capacity, I mean, it's how many times of Estonian annual? 5-fold, 6-fold? It's huge. 1 gigawatt is 4 gigawatt hours or terawatt hours. Yes, roughly, yes. So Estonia's total electricity consumption is 8 terawatt hours. 2 giga is what we need for our consumption. So it leaves us with a 5. We have an input to also generate the SAF. So, but for me, if these numbers are all correct, this project is just bankable. Why don't we do it? There is plenty of money globally.
Jaanus wanted to add.
Yes, just a little further thought on this. So Estonia's electricity consumption is 8 terawatt hours, but we are switching to electricity in other sectors as well. So 32 terawatt hours around that is our final energy consumption, and most of it will shift to electricity. But that still leaves several gigawatts potential behind, but again, not all of it will be realized. But again, it's good that we have this potential on the offshore wind. We would be very happy if by 2030 there would be 2 gigawatts of offshore wind. Then most of our electricity price-related concerns would be alleviated. But then again, we have also production on land, which is developing rapidly right now. So by mid-2020s, when we have the height restriction alleviation, we will have, I would guess, around 1 gigawatt on land as well. And the pilot project for hydrogen was used, is being, the biomass CHP is being used for producing the hydrogen. So that means that there are several possibilities. But just coming back to why would Estonia have a competitive advantage in SAF production? I mean, compared to Finland, we don't, because they have many years and several industries already there. But if it's something new where the market is still being developed and we can hone our skills and, I don't know, produce hydrogen, then that could be our opportunity. But I guess we cannot jump to being the Finnish liquid fuels production in a few years. Maybe we can. We can always dream.
Can I also add to it a bit? I think one thing to touch on quickly is if we try to electrify everything, then where do we store our energy?
Hydrogen.
Yes, and then we don't electrify everything. We need an even split between that. As you can currently also see, we can electrify a lot, but the heavier duty we go, the harder it gets. And in aviation, of course, sustainable aviation fuels, it's I think, as we've seen many times, it's supply security on why we should start doing it. We do have the potential. We do have Ida-Viru, where we have just transition. And this could be the perfect just transition because the skill sets are the same and they have a very strong chemical cluster. And it's also upskilling a lot and providing actually a lot more value. The advantage is, we have a small country, but we do a lot of biomass. We're very knowledgeable on that side. We're using it for everything anyways. Against Latvia or with Latvia, I think that's the question. There's always questions of scale. What's the size? I think we also are a bit cheaper than Finland in all fairness. Maybe sometimes the easiest ones are the best to start with, right? And actually we just need distributed production across Europe like this. As with energy, you go from centralized systems to distributed systems. Why not also fuel production? I don't think we really have had many opportunities to produce our own fuel in the history. So let's take those opportunities. And that's how we also reduce the long logistics gaps, which can be distributed quite easily. And yeah, they're quite susceptible also to all kinds of disturbances, logistical ones in particular. So this again adds to the security. So yeah, just all of that combined.
Thank you.
Yeah,
before
one more argument.
Okay. Before I give floor to Petrus, as I saw the fuel sector is wanting to add something. So please, Ivo.
Actually, I have a question. Ivo Adamson from Alexela. Petrus, you mentioned in your presentation regarding the hydrogen business case will arrive actually in 6 years, 7 years for the companies. In the light of that, the question is to Minister of Entrepreneurship, Mr. Sutt. Don't you think that we need to, probably from the government point of view, to create a market by ourselves? Do you have any idea that maybe we should have a roadmap for public transport when either trains, buses, ferries, what we saw, actually will turn and use alternative fuels? That's one thing, one question. The second question is, what about the governance? Who is really taking the lead from the ministry's point of view or from the government point of view, leading the process itself? Because if there is 100 people are dealing with the things, then you might say that nobody is dealing with that. And what I'm trying to tell is that is it the Minister of Environment or is it the Minister of Economics who is really leading the process in making the turnaround for alternative fuels? Thanks.
Well, that's a good question because we have all the three branches, so to say.
Before answering, I just think you, Petrus, wanted to comment on the previous section. Maybe it's okay to give this comment and then I will answer to Ivo, then I can think what I answer.
Very good, very good. Okay, just going into the last argument on why should Estonia invest in SAF and why should or could we be competitive? I get this question a lot, especially with the companies in Estonia. How is this going to be commercial? Well, there's a new argument adding to that question at this moment in time. If Fit for 55 is going to be adapted by all the member states, then it's not about the price of production, it's about the mandatory volumes you will have to produce, otherwise you will get the penalties. And then the penalties are the reason to invest. And that sets a new level playing field, not by the market, but by government policies. And that will steer the market. And I think we will see that more and more in the themes of sustainability, that the mandates that are being set by government will define the market, because they will come with penalties. You don't want them, so the level playing field rises. And then it will be more and faster competitive to be producing SAF in Estonia as well.
Okay, so the ultimate target setting is obviously by the cabinet. So now your question was more who is bringing this topic to the cabinet. And here I think who is more naturally placed is my fellow minister Taavi Aas' team, because if we think what we talk about, it's aviation, it's transportation, it's maritime. Why I'm so fond of it myself in terms of this topic is just sort of from the innovation point of view, and which is sort of my responsibility. Because otherwise, if we don't jump on this train, we will just miss out massively. And I don't think it is ultimately so complex that we can't really handle it. And maybe, I don't know, Jaanus, can you also talk a little bit about the roadmap, what our roadmaps what are in preparation? So we will get there, but of course, very important part is also by the clusters, because ultimately government can produce tons of papers. If there is no business interest, it will just remain a paper. And Parliament is also very relevant, so that's why I'm also happy that Timo is heading and initiated this support group in the Parliament. So I see some people are smiling, so maybe skeptical. They proof of the quality of the pudding is in eating. So let's see where we get, and you can always ask back. So what actually you did over past 6 months or past year, if we meet here, say 6 months from now or 1 year from now. But I think it's all doable. But maybe Jaanus, you can a bit elaborate.
Yes. So just a couple of thoughts to add to what Mr. Minister Sutt said. So obviously we can leave everything up for the government. We have a long list of actions to do. Everything is high priority. Everything should have been done 5 years ago. So there is always something to choose from. But if there are places where the private sector can start initiating actions, then these should be taken as well, and not just wait for the next subsidy or the next action plan by the government. But coming to the roadmap on the transport sector, I believe that there is a transport development plan that maps out the transport sector in Estonia. I would guess that it was recently adopted, but I would guess it does not specifically mention hydrogen, but it mentions the demand for fuels. And if hydrogen has a place there, if the technologies are there, if the heavy transport is switching to hydrogen, then why not? Because we have successfully introduced biomethane into our transport sector. There's a market there. Alexela is actively participating. Yeah, I know. Obviously, there is a case to be made that it needs additional support measures, but then again, there is a high competition on government money for support. So if we can do something without it, then it's easier. Otherwise, we go to the cabinet meeting asking for the additional funds, and then they say that there's a long line ahead of you. So Andres knows it very, very well how these things go. But regarding hydrogen specifically, we are working in close cooperation with Andres's team, with Ministry of Environment, with different teams from Taavi side. So the roadmap is being prepared, the baseline studies are there. There is one measure that is ongoing already to support hydrogen, to kickstart it in Estonia, the whole value chain, production, distribution, consumption, and there is a 50 million euro measure coming in Q4 this year. So this is the plan to start it in this way as a whole value chain, and then see from there. Also, there's this IPCEI initiative that's ongoing as well to support the business side of it. So it's not only that we must use everything in Estonia, but we can produce components for others to use. If that hydrogen, there's a business case in some other countries even more. They are already using hydrogen. Maybe it's gray. To switch it to green, it takes components that we could make. So yeah, I would guess that we are in a good place to go on, but we take as much support from the private sector as possible, because we have also limited resources, and only if we align ourselves, then we can get the maximum result.
Thank you. And from the environment side, as we see that things tend to, in time, align a lot from the cutting down the emissions. So therefore, yes, the different sources of different fuels, they have to be in a mix in a way that that advances the overall goal that we have to cut the emissions. So therefore, the new involving business cases and the new technologies that can be applied to better serve this broader goal, these need to be adopted. Of course, it would require, in many cases, the revision of previous plans, and this is something that we will be working on. And yes, gentleman in the back, Mr. Uibo, maybe you can ask the first question as well.
Well, I have one question, actually. Yeah, Thomas from X-Fly. We are in the middle of energy revolution. That is what it is. And what I'm missing in Estonia is the open discussion within the society, because we need support from all people in Estonia. So how important you think that is to explain this, what is coming to the general public? Because usually, I'm not pointing at you, Andres, but politicians have they don't take any decisions if they don't feel the support from the society. That's the logic behind that. So should we start that now, or when we should start that discussion within the society? Thank you.
It should be ongoing, right? This is the thing that, well, needs to be in place, not yesterday, but yes, 5 years ago, and not only 5 years ago, as long as we can look back in time. But yes, of course we need the discussion. The thing is also that we don't know it better than the private sector does. And therefore, I would also add to the population side also the academia that really know the answers to many of the questions that we have on the government side, to the many of the questions that you may have on the private sector side, and also the kind of affirmation from the population to say that, yes, these solutions really work, they don't hit us hard, our pockets hard, and they really are safe and move us forward. So yes, there is no other answer to you, that yes, it has to be kind of strengthened, this discussion, and there is never enough discussion. But yes, the Minister.
Yeah, if I just may compliment, and I still consider myself a young politician, so maybe my reactions are not always 100% politically driven. If you think from consumers or end users' point of view, what you need is a use case. If we sort of take our digital journey, it has been a success because we have been collectively able to create use cases which made people's lives easier. If we can create a use case over hydrogen from an angle, for example, from the environment protection or safety or efficiency, or maybe for the sake of being in the forefront of innovation, and that actually is people can relate to. When there will be a debate, I think it's a bit like we would start debating here with the general public. So what should we think of Web3? You know what Web3 is? So people are shaking head off already. Web3 is a third generation internet, which proponents argue will fundamentally reshape the Web2, which you are currently living in, where you, as a person, will not be a product any longer in the hands of a big tech companies, but you will become an owner of the data, what you actually give today for free for big techs. Niche debate, difficult to see how to make it in public. But once people start seeing that because of Web3, we actually, our life for data protection, privacy, new services will become available, then we start adopting it. So I think for me the key point is how we can make people to adopt the new technologies. And then there will be debates and things, because the risk with the debate is also that if we take a topic and then it just gets heated, very controversial, that may also stop the innovation. It just kills it because people can't agree. And then, of course, and here I agree fully with what you said, Thomas. When politicians say that, look, there is one camp who says, well, no hydrogen, and then there is another camp who says, yes, only hydrogen, then politician intuitively says, okay, well, probably we need a working group. So if we can, before creating a working group, get a use case, then it's a different story. Because as I started, the success of our digital journey has been based on the use cases.
And how we get there is that we have to build the critical mass. Because once you realize that you have the power over your data, this has little market value. If we have, for example, in Estonia, 2/3 of the population saying that, yes, I know that I'm the owner of my data, then it creates a market force. So therefore, do we want to wait for the other generation to become and solve the issues? Or we can put our backs together saying that, yes, we have a bit of support in the private sector, in the government, in the population, in order to create this kind of critical mass. So, of course, you are here, so therefore you must have some kind of interest in this. And therefore, we are very eager to see that we can proceed on this journey together. Of course, there are no easy ways out. This will have to be a long game, and we have to test out what works and what doesn't really. and then to find the ways that really suit our needs. But are there any questions you would like to ask more? Because we have approached very close to the time that we have said that we would draw the conclusions to today. Yes, Einleider. It has to be green.
It's very green now. Right. The seminar is titled Estonia Testbed. What testbed means? Can you explain me or give me some samples how Estonia can be a good testbed? What sort of test? Is testbed the same thing as sandbox? Or Marek, maybe you can explain, please?
I'll start, but it's sandbox testbed. Doesn't matter. It's what it enables is the question, and I think the minister just said something that shows that we're quite a good sandbox or testbed. Have you seen this? Like, okay, climate neutral by 2030. It's for us would be a very easy target. We just put a few airlines and SAF internally, and we're done. And then we come out. Okay, let's enable this very fast coverage throughout the entire Estonia using future technologies like air taxis, eVTOLs, whatever combination of them. You can introduce drones into this very low level airspace. Henrik Ololei also was talking about this. This is the combined innovation. And that's the sandbox or testbed environment where we see aviation for Estonia would be very good. We actually mapped ourselves last year. We did this technological circle from like Tartu Airport or Tallinn Airport and compare these new battery airplanes and hydrogen airplanes and from the smaller to the larger. And we see like, okay, first ones into the market, they can already cover the entire country. Like, it's not Germany or some big US, like where you can maybe do a city or the next city, or they have to land in the middle. Everything that we put into the market can cover the entire country straight away. So if we talk about scaling, then we can give the country straight away, not some small region always, or limiting it. So I started with IT already. Very fast uptake, only needed 1 million ID cards and countries covered. Easy and a lot cheaper than for bigger regions to even try those things. So I think Estonia can be the first pilot location for full-scale deployment and then do it with 1 million people and it's done. So I think that's the testbed. Just trial everything. And have crazy ideas to top off the initial ones. Yeah, exactly.
So, thank you. And as we previously had to skip one of the presentations, maybe we can now listen to to give reference to the possibilities that we might have in Estonia in the European context. So I'm happy to show you the video where Jorgo Chatzimarkakis from Hydrogen Europe will tell us what would be possible by 2030. So, the European perspective, and this gentleman was named the Person of the Year on hydrogen, so therefore he must know the business.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jorgo Chatzimarkakis. I'm the CEO of Hydrogen Europe, and I'm delighted to accept this invitation. I'm happy to see that in Estonia, there are a lot of hydrogen activities. Estonia is actively involved, not only via its government, but also via high representatives in the European Commission, not to say all the names, but definitely the Commissioner Kadri Simpson and also the Director General for Aviation, also responsible for in DG Move, Directorate General DG Move, Henrik Hololei, are very important Estonian representatives having an interest also in hydrogen. Let me talk about aviation and the possibilities of hydrogen in aviation and how aviation could use hydrogen. What would be possible until 2030? Now, first of all, let me clarify that we are in the midst of the third industrial revolution. So basically, what we see at the moment is that we can see we enter after the second revolution into 21st century third revolution, whereas in the 19th century, the first industrial revolution, it was based on steam-powered telegraph, abundant coal, locomotives. In the 20th century, second industrial revolution, we saw centralized power systems, telephone, cheap oil, and combustion cars. Now in the 21st century, we move as humankind to solar and wind, so to renewables, to the use of internet, to the hydrogen renewables, so hydrogen based on renewables as one of the main forms of transporting this energy, and to digital mobility. If we take a closer look at where it's cheap and easy to produce hydrogen, you can see that these locations are possibly not all in Europe. So we will produce hydrogen in Europe, and Estonia having access to the Baltic Sea with quite some wind there, having ports will be an important place for hydrogen production and also reception, because hydrogen will also come via importing channels. And here you go. Here you see where hydrogen will be produced in the next 5 years. This will start. As of 5 years, it will be really, really highly produced in the MENA region, so Middle East, North Africa. Australia, with the new government now, will focus very much away from coal, but to hydrogen. And also Namibia, South Africa, and also in Latin America, Chile, are places where hydrogen can be produced cheap. And in some of these places, you can see that the kilo of hydrogen will be produced for €2 only. In Chile, even less than €1. By the way, even in Northern Europe, North Norway, North Sweden, you can achieve these very, very low prices for hydrogen. There it's because of hydropower, 24/7 possibilities. Let's turn to aviation. You can use hydrogen as a fuel directly in aviation. And I will concentrate in my presentation on these elements. Of course, you will, and we will use hydrogen also to produce the so-called synthetic fuels, e-kerosene. And if I go back to this slide, the countries that are good in producing oil, so Saudi Arabia, they will now retrofit their production schemes and become possibly leaders also in e-kerosene, but not only. They will see also new producers, new countries that are not on our list. I want to concentrate on hydrogen directly used and would like to show you what is coming when. Let me start with Airbus. Airbus is a member of Hydrogen Europe. I will only show you issues or ideas and projects of our members. And here the Zero E program foresees that they will develop the first world hydrogen-powered commercial aircraft by 2035 with 3 different airframes that are being developed: turbofan, turboprop, and blended wing body. In order to understand better what they will be doing, they have started with an A380 demonstrator, which has been announced already and it will use the very first A380 produced as a test bed for hydrogen engines. The aircraft will be fitted with 4 hydrogen tanks and a 5th engine located along the fuels edge. Here you see how it looks like, this ZERO-E program. So you can see that there are hydrogen-powered gas turbines. Gas turbines will, of course, be modified. The combustion chamber is modified, and the fuel injectors and the fuel system. Then there will be a modified tank, of course, because you need liquid hydrogen, so very, very condensed way of storing power, renewable power in this case, in liquid hydrogen, in a non-pressurized zone behind the rear pressure bulkhead. Then you see where the fuel cell will be located. It's a fuel cell on megawatt scale, supplementing the gas turbines with electrical power at very high levels of efficiency. And then you have also the power electronics and the electric motors, which are powered by the fuel cells and injecting energy onto the shaft. So this is an aircraft that we can expect as of 2035. Wow, it's even for me, not being an expert in aircrafts, but being an expert in hydrogen, it's fantastic to see that. Another member of ours is called ZeroAvia. This is a UK-based company which is retrofitting a turboprop aircraft with a hydrogen-powered engine. The tests are ongoing. The first commercial operation is scheduled for 2024 to go from Rotterdam to London. This is very, very soon. This is in 2 years. It's around the corner. And here you see the plans of ZeroAvia. So you see in 2024, the 10 to 20 seat small scale airplanes with a range of 300. And this is the first commercial offering. Then as of 26, the planes roll and the range grows from 40 to 80 seats to 1,000 range. And then in 2030, it goes again up to 200 seats, 2,000 range, 2035, already 300 range, and in 2040, transatlantic. And you can go then very, very far. ZeroAvia has started a partnership with Alaska Air Group, retrofitting a Dash 400 for 76 packs. And they also have a 35 million investment from United, and they ordered already 50 engines with an option for 50 more of these engines. What else is there? So who is doing what? So Hy2Fly is a small airplane that you see on that side here. So it's an aviation that uses hydrogen also directly for props. They are testing hydrogen applications at different aircrafts. It's really testing already many, many years, and it goes very, very well. Hy2Fly's Hy4 plane is a test bed to understand the potential of hydrogen in aviation. It's done by DLR, so the German Airspace and Aeronautic Association, plus Professor Josef Kallo, who is a specialist in that. And Aviation H2 plans to have Australia's first hydrogen-powered flight in 2023. That's another project. The company will use liquid ammonia on a retrofitted Dassault 15 Falcon business jet. So ammonia as another form of synthetic fuel, if you wish. We are thinking about ammonia in the maritime industry mainly. And here you see one example also for aviation. And Universal Hydrogen is working on a conversion kit for regional turboprop aircraft, looking at 2025 commercial start. What we are doing at the moment is that we are working as Hydrogen Europe on the legislation to make this all happen, because 2030 is around the corner. The industry is getting ready. So the development of zero-emission aviation should be supported, of course, by politics, by the policy makers. And this is why, this is important, hydrogen should be included also in the scope of the upcoming Refuel EU Aviation. That's a legislative proposal which is on the table of members of parliament and also the council where Estonia is represented. And it lays the foundations now, and hydrogen is not really included, but we need to include hydrogen into the scope. I have to thank you for your attention. I think it's fascinating what we see here in combination of zero emission flying. It's possible, it's doable, and we will see that also Estonia will play a big role there. I'm absolutely sure. Thanks very much indeed.
So, I thank you all for taking part in this event, for your contribution here and elsewhere. So, I would like to thank all the speakers and all the participants. So, just to very briefly maybe sum it up, we see a drastic move on the European level, creating the demand as well as the supply for cleaner and greener future. We see the drastic rise in the electrolyzer capacities to be installed in Europe. We have seen quite rapid developments in R&D and also where Estonia is quite actively taking part, also in electrolyzer development and energy efficiency building, and different storage opportunities, also taking into account the global trends of seeking out the possibilities of reducing the use of precious metals, and we are in the phase of developing very innovative new solutions, therefore contributing to the overall European competitiveness as well. We also see that connectivity being built by the great drive from the European level. We see that the emissions restrictions and cut obligations to be tightened and tightened time by time. Therefore, it remains for us to see that the game is on, and the question is whether we see ourselves and how we see ourselves in this game and in what role. So the choice is ours. I thank you.